So tell us about your journey getting going in this genre. When did you get started and what prompted you to get into it?
To be honest with you, content creating is something I've been trying to do for a long time. For an example, I spent 17 years in prison. While in prison, I wrote over 40 books. So I published right now, and I published 13 books. So I felt like that was a lot of content. And as soon as I came home, while I pushed the content of the books, trying to basically pursue the dream of taking my books from books to movies, I created different YouTube channels and not fully understanding the importance of it at that time. You can look on YouTube right now and it may be 10 or 11 YouTube channels with my name on that I have no access to. So once I figured that out and I seen that a lot of things that I did pertaining to films, because we got a few films out as documentaries about things that we do pertaining to prison life and DC prisoners. But I wanted to take some of the stories that I had that was nonfiction and some of the stories that I had that were fiction and find a way to put them on YouTube. And
So you're
I think I
17,
started, huh?
you're 17 books, or you're 10. How many books did you do?
Well, I probably wrote about 40 books, but I had 13 books published and several other books without my name on it.
And are those fiction, nonfiction, a mixture?
The one I'm talking about right now, they are all fiction books. Books like Lorton Legends, Fast Lane. These are some of the first books I wrote, some of the first books that I kind of like got into creative writing. And then I went into true crime writing. Like while I was in prison, I wrote for Don Diva magazine, like your Frey articles about the
Oh, you
Panamanian.
did the Frey stuff. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, me and Seth Ferranti, and we wrote about Wayne Perry and other street figures that had something to do with Washington, D.C.
So you got cracking working on your writing not long after you got sentenced, huh? Or how long did it take for you to get in that mode?
It took me about 5 or 6 years.
So you had a long. We don't have to go into your crime too much, but just what did you get
We
such a
go into
long term
my
for?
crime's over. I paid my debts to society, man. We could
So
go into
what
whatever.
you were young. You must have been pretty young.
Yeah, at 16, I was charged as an adult for a homicide.
Oh, you were 16. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What was that roughly? What was the backdrop of that case?
Uh, in the 90s, as you study true crime and things that go on. In the 90s, DC was the murder capital. And I guess I could say that I was one of the pawns in that game as a teenager that was caught up in what was going on in the murder capital at that time. And I found myself involved in a drug-related homicide that went wrong.
So, and it probably wasn't any big money deal thing, right? Just kind of.
Nah. I would be lying to you if I said it was some big money thing. It was just the same regular old type of
Well,
bullshit.
no, that's the reality. Very few things are big money.
Yeah, well, nah. I done seen some big money things, but my thing wasn't big money.
Well, not when you're 16. I guess it's hard. Yeah.
Well, let's not forget, we got a couple people that's from Washington, D.C. that went to jail at 20 and 21 years old and had $1 million cases.
Oh, for sure, but they're the exception, not the rule.
Oh, I'm only talking about the exception in this matter.
Yeah. So you get to prison, and that's good. So within 5 years, you're getting into creative mode.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was a kid, before I went to prison, I had creative desires. For an example, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and go-go was the biggest music in the world. Shout out to Chuck Brown and Raz's and Backyard Band and things like that. So I used to rap with a go-go band, and a buddy of mine had a studio, so I used to try to, do music. And I say that only to say that I had a flair for writing. And in prison, I was a part of a rap group, so to say, that people that we were in a prison that had a studio, so writing and poetry and different things, that's something that I did while I was in prison, among other things.
Did you catch the last of Lorton?
Yeah, I went to Lorton. I was at Lorton when I first went to jail. I went from DC jail to Lorton at 16.
Can you describe? I mean, we've all heard horror stories. Can you kind of walk us through going into Lorton at that time for you?
For me, yeah, I could definitely do it for me. And I mean, just to add to what you're asking me, I could do it not only for me, I could do it for me on the inside and I could do it for me on the outside. So as a kid, I visited Lorton for the first 6-7 years of my life. I mean, give or take a few months before my father went to prison. So my life as a juvenile, aside from other good things, because I don't want to make it seem like my whole childhood was bad, but a big part of my life as a child was catching a bus down Lorton to go see my father with my grandparents, or riding with my grandparents after church on Sunday to go visit my father down Lorton. And my father had been sent down Lorton at the age of 18 for armed robbery, and a large part of my childhood was spent down there. By the time I was 16, skipping a whole lot of things in between, in a bad, ironic way, I found myself in the same prison, in the same cell that he had spent 5 years in by the time I was 17. So to go in Lorton, as you say, to just walk you through, as a young person, going from the history that I knew from my father and the history that you know from walking the streets of Washington, D.C., you hear horror stories of Lorton, you hear different type of things. So, I knew that I was going into a highly dangerous place, and I had already spent months in D.C. jail, which is another dangerous place. But I kind of related to just walking into something like, I would imagine a soldier going into war. You don't know what's going to happen on the other side, but, you step in and you're going forward, and I just could do it one day at a time. I mean, some people went to Lorton and didn't make it out. I mean, you had people stabbed to death in Lorton. You had people shot to death in Lorton. You had people catch RICO cases in Lorton that people are charged with in the free world. People wore street clothes. I seen people with $10,000 diamond chains. Anything that you wanted to do or get into, you could almost get into down Lorton. I mean, Lorton was just another part of DC behind a cage, about 25 miles away from DC in Lorton, Virginia.
So it felt like almost like a more intense version of the neighborhood as opposed to some whole new place.
Yeah, for me, I would say that. I mean, if you were a person that hung out and you were, what people say, you hang out outside, you're an urban person, you were in the mix, then that's what it was if you were down Lorton. And just so happened, the part of Lorton that I was in maximum security. So that's a lockdown place. That's a 23-1. But, you had places in Lorton that were open dormitories, 60 to 90 people in one big old dorm could walk around all day.
Oh, that was probably worse, huh?
I mean, that's the part of Lorton that people talk about when they say it was like the streets. They had streets. The police rode around in vans. It was really like you were in the projects.
Did your dad's presence there before you help you at all?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. That's a good question. I would definitely have to say so. Not only, I mean, Ben, though you asked me about my father, rest in peace to Larry Williams. But, I had cousins and uncles and people that preceded me there that helped me out as well. However, but my father was friends with the dude that we spoke about on the telephone, Khalif Mujahid, Fly. I mean, and, there was a lot of thorough dudes down Lorton, but, Fly name rings bells. And when I got there, Fly was, let's say, he was in his heyday when I got there. However, me being a juvenile, I wasn't on that part of the prison with him. So, I really still had to fend for myself, so to speak. But the generation of young people that came through there with me, I developed friendships with a group of guys that came from the top right tier, the juvenile block. I mean, and we stuck together, so we was okay. But I would definitely say that my father's connections and relationships help, guide me into, knowing the way. It was almost like a GPS system for me.
That's a good way to put it. DC, despite having a lot of infamous crime, was also a city with a huge black middle class and what's the dichotomy, or what was the dichotomy then of the poor parts and wild activities, but DC had a lot of black business owners, black home ownership, black government jobs, black mayor. What do you think was the disconnect between, what made the city so violent despite there being opportunities to enter the middle class and et cetera, or did it all kind of go together into a gumbo?
Just to touch on the violent part of what you asked, I'm not really an expert in some of those things, but I do consider myself a student of history. And if you go back to the beginning of the history of the District of Columbia, when it was founded, the the District of Columbia was like a haven for runaway slaves and renegades from all over the country. And as slavery was abolished and different things came into play here, from slavery, as I mentioned, the runaway slave thing, all the way down to the 60s with civil rights. The whole town has been a town that was built on taking a stand and sometimes, you know, being rebellious. So I think that that type of spirit that has always been here from slavery, before slavery, and all the way up to the 60s, I think it kind of spilled over into the population and the culture of, let's say, inner city DC, as things transitioned away from Black power more to gangsterism and street crime. And if you want to match it to other things that occurred in the 60s and after the assassination of Martin Luther King and people like Fred Hampton, when you know, people like J. Edgar Hoover, you know, attacked Black nationalism, the only other thing that was able to spring up here was gangsterism. And I think that's what happened, if you want to ask me pertaining to the violence question. Now, in regards to the question of the Black middle class and people that were thriving here, you got to also remember that when it comes to slavery, once again, most people think slavery ended in 1865, yeah, for the rest of the country. But for the District of Columbia, slavery ended in 1862. Therefore, the population here was almost 75% Black population, 75% free, 25% enslaved. Afterwards, you got to keep in mind that these Black people had a head start over other.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, now let's not forget, in places like Massachusetts and New York and New England, there were already Black people that were free anyway. I'm not including them in what I'm talking about right now. I'm only including enslaved Black people. In regard to enslaved Black people, the Black people of the District of Columbia were, quote unquote, emancipated 3 years prior. And if you want to go all the way into Gainesville, Texas, when other people didn't know that they were free, that's 1868. So you're giving the Black people in Washington, D.C. almost an 8-year jump in advantage on economic stability and passing down generational wealth. So that's my answer for that. That's what I think.
Well, I didn't know that. So there was and when you said it, that was that like a underground railroad, like maybe like the first you could get there, like what was going on in the 1850s?
Well, you know, I wasn't there, but through my reading, one thing, like for an example, since some type of way we just slipped into this conversation, one of the biggest slave revolt attempts came out of the District of Columbia, where the freed Black people helped the enslaved Black people to get on a ship. And right now, I had so many other things that I want to talk about. I forgot the name of the ship, but I could give it to you. But it was one of the biggest slave breaks in this area. But nevertheless, my point is that the enslaved and the free in the District of Columbia work together. And a lot of times the District of Columbia is mostly made up of annexed land from Maryland. So during the times of emancipation, there were people who had family in the District of Columbia and family in Maryland, and their land overlapped the border. So there are cases right now in the Supreme Court that you can look up where people who they thought were ignorant were enslaved and educated through the means of the church, and understood that if they stayed on one side of the plantation, they were in the District of Columbia, and if they stayed on another side of the plantation, they were in Prince George's County, Maryland. And they filed to the court for their freedom, saying that they were a District of Columbia resident. So, like, you know, when it comes to being alert and, you know, rebellious and standing up for your rights, you know, once again, I take it back to, you know, what goes on here and what's always gone on here for those of us that know. You know, like a lot of times now people don't really care about what happened. But when I say what happened, I mean what happened in the past. But I kind of understand the mentality, like the mentality that I have right now, which I believe is a blessing from the Creator. But I also believe that the mentality that I have of never letting nobody tell me no is what also got me out of prison. You know what I mean? I went to the library. I did what I felt as though that I had to do. And I mean, that's a part of the spirit that we got here. And, you know, that's what I attribute that to.
Well, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, thank you. So, all right, so let's fast forward to what you've been doing, working on with your new projects.
Okay. One of the things that I think I've been having the most success with, I want to send a big shout out to my homie Fly, Khalif Mujahid. AKA Keith Gaffney Bay for people that that know him and know people from DC. But he did 50 years in prison, and lately we've been working on his life story in different ways, and we found an audience on YouTube, among other places, telling that story and telling the stories of other prisoners that came from DC that had left a mark or some type of way in the federal system. And when you look at YouTube, and if you into anything pertaining to prison life or prison history, because it's not just for YouTube, it's not just YouTube for me. For an example, like Pete Early have a book out right now called No Human Contact. He had a book out called The High House, just to mention two, let's say prominent prison books. But, I was into reading that type of stuff years before I became a writer. So it's something that I was into. Now I'm in a position where, I have a platform to go from here to the internet, from here to the YouTube, from here to we shout out to Kareem Mowat and Sean Branch, who I did the Lorton documentary with. We went straight to Amazon Prime. So, it's just too many platforms for me to be able to bring my own stories and stories I'm interested in straight to the people that's the audience. So the Fly Story is something I've been doing, and DC Blacks is something I created on YouTube, as well as I created a nonprofit organization to back it to help people like myself that spent, decades in prison and pretty much come home to a gentrified city where everything has changed. So, every little step that I take is just, man, to help somebody like myself that's coming behind me. So, those are a few of the projects that I'm working on amongst the other things that I'm doing with, books and anything creative. But YouTube is my focus. I've been focused hard on YouTube for like the whole last 6 months.
And so you went in 93 and you got out in what, 2010?
Yeah, 2010.
So boy, the city really had changed. What did it feel like? Did you know it had changed, or was it like weird experience?
I thought I knew, but you don't know until you get off that bus at Union Station and everything that you see is different. But I'm pretty much like my equilibrium is good when it comes to composition and where you are. So if you are really from anywhere, but if you're really from DC, you're gonna know that the main street's gonna go up and down, the other streets are gonna go left and right. So you're never gonna be lost. Now, I don't know about it for a newcomer, but for me, I just needed to know the landmarks. But many of the landmarks had been overgrown. Like when weeds overgrow, they had been overgrown by buildings. But the basis of it's still the same, man. No matter what, they could put some new pretty buildings up. This dangerous parts of the neighborhood are still the dangerous parts of the neighborhood.
What area were you from?
I'm from Northwest, like between Rittenhouse and Kennedy Street. They call it Upper Northwest, but where I'm from, we call it Uptown.
Is that like by Shaw Cardozo? You know what that is?
It's a little bit past that. I mean, that's Northwest, but that's a little bit down from me. Like, my grandmother and them from down that part. I'm from further up toward the Maryland line.
Where's that at?
Trinidad, that's Northeast.
Yeah. Oh, it's Northeast. Okay.
Yeah, I'm from Northwest.
So just like Detroit, I mean, probably when you went away, it wasn't like what parts of the city were bad. It was probably what few parts of the city weren't bad, right? It was probably most of DC was pretty wild then, huh?
I mean, I'm not going to exaggerate and say that. I mean, if you know the District of Columbia, right, for decades, anything west of Rock Creek Park is going to be the nice, pretty safe part of town, regardless. And as far
as
Georgetown and beyond, Georgetown, Foxhall, Palisade. I went to school in that neighborhood. I know some people up there. I mean, I met friends up there that were true friends that did time with me. So, like, I'm not just from one part of DC. I've been all around the whole city.
Do you like DC now?
Man, I love DC.
So, it's a very international city now, too.
Yeah, I mean, that don't mean that you love everything about DC. Like, for an example, I love my bathroom. I got a bath, I got a shower, I got a nice sink, but I don't want to sit in the toilet.
Well, that's true, too. So let's talk about a high-profile event in terms of fame that just went on. A very famous Washington, D.C. criminal turned informant, Rayful Edmond, just released. And there's a lot of, he released a video where he said, 59 back and better than ever, or whatever he said. What you must have crossed paths with different people that worked for him, with him, that were told on by him. Like, what do you think the general vibe about him in the city, or is it just that's so far in the past, it's just in the past?
To be honest with you, man, I'm gonna give you a straight answer. I think it's mixed, and I mean, I think that I think people from all type of walks of life have an opinion about it. And I start with, let's say, the news media. You know, all our major news networks, from Fox to CBS to ABC, carried a story on that one little teeny video that you just mentioned, and you seen it all the way 3,000 miles away, and they mentioned it. So, you know, I would say that it's kind of mixed for contemporary people, or people who are just into what's in the news. I think it's something that are just passed. For some street people, that's spectators, like the people that used to watch the DVDs and read the street magazines. I think they'll watch it like they'll watch Boosie Case if they was into hip hop. And then I think you have people that fall in the category like me, that we are really victims of the justice system, whether it's from our own doing or not, right? And we don't look at it like it's a badge of honor to come home that way. We look at it as, man, I did the crime, I did the time, I came home this way, and we're not going to honor specifically myself. And this wouldn't be specific to Rayful. Like, I'm not going to honor anybody that went to jail under a certain type of code that then broke that code. I know a lot of people don't care about codes these days. So, you know, when I talk, I don't try to make that, the catalyst of all my values, but it means something to me. And I don't stand with people like that. I don't stand with people who send people to jail. And I don't care if you were at the top of the food chain or you was at the bottom of the food chain. I'm gonna look at you the same way. I'm not gonna give you a pass just because whatever you did in the process of sending people to jail, you made a lot of money doing it. You know, that's just how I feel about it.
Now it's good that his partner Tony Lewis got out before him.
And shout out to Tony Lewis. I got a lot of respect for Tony Lewis. I know him personally.
And his son, right there, big community activist.
Yeah, good friend of mine, Tony Lewis Jr. I mean, used to support me and help me while I was in prison. I mean, a lot of these things that people talk about when they talk about reentry, his son was doing that for all of his friends and all of his nephew friends while I was in prison. I mean, even to this day.
What year did you move over to the Lorton adult side at some point?
Oh, when I said I was on another section, that's all adult. But until you turn 18, nah, it's not no younger. You're just when you first go to Lorton until you're 18, you go to PC. You stay in PC till you're 18, but you're still on the compound where you're in max. It don't make a difference.
Okay.
And so when you turn 18,
what age did you stay at Lorton until?
I stayed at Lorton until 20.
And then you were sent to federal prison, or?
Yeah, everybody got sent to federal prison.
Oh, that's when it was closing. What year did it close?
2001, the last person left, but I left in 97.
So it was being phased down. So that was the period in which so many DC inmates were being put into the federal system.
Well, at that time and before, like they've been
always were, but even more.
No, I'm talking about just the phase out part that you talking about. I know you know about the earlier years. Yeah. We're not talking about that. I'm just talking about in my years. The phase out began in 1997, I believe, with the enactment of the Federal Revitalization Act of 1997, if I'm not mistaken. And that was basically passed by people that's not from DC. That was passed by Congress to say, basically, we're going to get these guys out of here.
Because Lorton was in such bad condition, or?
I mean, there's many things that they say, but I really feel like, that may have been one of them, but there's a whole bunch of other conditions. I mean, it goes all the way to District of Columbia residents striving for statehood. Like, District of Columbia residents have no say-so on anything on no federal level. So if they just said that we don't want to do this no more on a congressional level, no one can say nothing about it. And I think that's what ended up happening.
And just as a quick political aside, for those that don't know, you as a DC resident, what's your ability to elect somebody that has any formal voting rights in the federal government?
A DC resident has no voting right on a federal level for anything other than president of the United States.
And you're the only people in the country for whom that's true, right?
Because we are not a state.
And yet you're in the middle of the country and have the capital there. What a weird.
Yeah, and we pay federal taxes and don't have a federal vote.
Do you think if DC was, as DC has become less black, is there more of a move from the new
Hey,
residents
let me
to try
correct
to?
you on something. I keep hearing a lot of people saying less black. It's less black than Chocolate City, but people make it seem like the statistics is 37% or this or that. The percentage of it is still something like 49% compared to Caucasian being 40 something percent. And don't forget other. So it makes it almost even now. So it's not Chocolate City, it's Mocha.
Well, with it, do the new residents, are they pushing for more federal rights, or everybody always has been?
I'm gonna say this. I feel like the people who are into political stuff here, they pushing for statehood, which is federal rights. I feel like the people who move here from other states that is unheard of, they're pushing for it, but they have to kind of like fall into the battle with what people in DC are pushing for pertaining to statehood. But the Second Amendment is an important issue to me. And I did notice that and people moving here from states that had a knowledge and they had a knowledge of their Second Amendment gun rights when they came here. They filed for those things. So people from other places are coming here that lived in states that had certain type of rights and saying that the District of Columbia, being as though it's an anomaly and a project in itself, are violating the Constitution in itself by denying certain rights. I mean, some of those laws that were changed, they went all the way to the Bruin case in Supreme Court, which changed New York's gun laws, were initiated by a case that came out of the District of Columbia.
Mm.
So that's to answer your question pertaining to people that's not from here. A lot of people say that they don't like certain things about people that's not from here, but when it comes to gun rights and legalizing guns, that came from people that's not from here. And I lived here when we died by the 400s and 500s yearly, and we couldn't have a legal gun.
So the law changed there?
Yeah, they changed the law. It's called Heller versus the District of Columbia. A person named Dick Heller that was a I'm not gonna call him a rental cop. I'm gonna call him he was a private security guard. He could carry a gun when at work, but when leaving work, he couldn't carry his gun, and he felt like that was a violation of the Second Amendment, which technically it is. And you know, not to make it about race, but he was a white man in the District of Columbia and felt like his rights was being violated. And him and his lawyers put together a class of people that came from other places. Someone came from a state where they were, they were LGBTQ and they defended their right with a handgun. Another one was assaulted with a handgun and defended their life with a handgun from another state. And about 10 12 people all together changed
That's
the law.
interesting.
Look
So
it up. Look
these
it
were
up. It's
all
an
people that
interesting case.
moved to DC from states where they had more gun rights
And
and
they
felt
challenged it here
deprived.
and they changed the law. And in the process of changing the law here, they affected changing the law in the whole country.
So when did that happen?
The initial one began in like 2010, I want to say, but there's been 3 versions. You know how some cases go back and go back. It's been at least 2 versions of the Heller case, but the Heller case is the big daddy godfather case for the guns in the District of Columbia. And in all actuality, it could have changed the gun rights for the whole country. But some type of way the U.S. Attorney's Office persuaded the people here not to go to the next level and just leave it alone because they knew New York and the Bruin case was going to Supreme Court anyway. And the Bruin case changed gun rights for the whole country. The most restrictive gun laws in the country were in New York and some other place, and they were changed because of that law.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I'm learning a lot of new stuff today.
Yeah, you got to know the gun laws here, because if you don't, you'll go to jail for more time for a gun than you will for a murder.
How overrun with federal, like if someone's involved in crime in DC now, I mean, it sounds like there's alphabet soup of federal agents all over the place.
Yeah, this DC, that's regular for me. That's not even new. I grew up like that. Like some people come here, family and relatives, they'll come here. I mean, and it'll look weird to them. Like they might feel like they're in Moscow, but this is what we know, but we only see that when we go like downtown. You don't see that everywhere. I mean, but at the same time, I can drive to the White House in 10 minutes.
I came for Trump's 2016 inauguration. We stayed on Good Hope Road and Martin Luther King or something. That was still pretty rough area.
That's the hood. Yeah, that's
Oh,
real.
yeah, we were in like a new
That's
condo.
real. That's real DC.
Yeah, no, that was they had a cop stationed in the 7-Eleven. It was wild.
Yeah, substation. I know what you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah, yeah. But um, what what
about.
what? So are you and Fly are doing like a full documentary now?
I mean, you know how some people get to say, "Oh, we're doing this and oh, we're doing that." Right now, we're just trying to document the story and get the story down. Whatever medium, that presents itself to us, such as like YouTube right now. YouTube is just something that we've been doing as practice, but the content that's been springing up from it is content that when we look at the raw footage of it, not what I release on YouTube. What I release on YouTube is almost the behind the scenes, is what I shoot with the phone as opposed to what's on the camera. So I'm sure you understand. It's almost like the B-roll. It's not
Yeah.
even what we're really doing. So I think in the end we'll probably have a documentary, but his ultimate goal is that he wants a movie, or he wants a movie about his life, and he knows and he understands, whether anybody else does, that to spend 50 years in prison and some of the prisons that he's been in, at the least it's remarkable. You know what I mean? I don't mean that in a good or bad way. I'm just saying it's
It's just
noteworthy.
unique.
You don't
Yeah.
meet a person that spent 50 years in prison every day and they are still sane.
Oh yeah. You wouldn't think to hear him talk. You wouldn't think. He doesn't seem mentally or emotionally damaged or anything.
I mean, I think he definitely is coherent. And as far as mentally and emotionally damaged, I think anybody, myself
But he,
included, in prison, we're gonna have some type of scars. But
but he
I think
doesn't show it. I mean, he's really sharp considering he
he's
did
very
50 years.
sharp. I mean, I know people who have not spent 50 years in prison that are not as sharp. Dig that.
For those that might be interested to go to your channel and check his stuff out, give us a little synopsis of the story of who he is, and maybe they'll want to go check that out.
All right, so my channel is DC Blacks on YouTube, and I have a number of different stories, but a lot of people had started supporting us for the Fly stories. Fly in the aspect of prison history, he's one of the original, let's say, DC Blacks, and DC Blacks was really a derogatory term that the Bureau of Prison put on guys out of Washington D.C. So now I kind of glamorized it and made it that, but in all actuality, it's a derogatory term, and nobody really goes by that. But within the federal prison system, people mention some of the, let's say, most influential or people who had the most pull in the federal system, and you're going to always hear Aryan Brotherhood, Mexican Mafia, DC Blacks, Crips and Bloods, and a couple other ones. When I say Mexican Mafia, I'm also including I'm including all the smaller ones. So I don't want nobody to say, "Oh, he left them out." That's not my point right now. My
Yeah,
point
yeah,
is that whatever ones that you hear about, Black people from DC are going to be involved in it, and they're called the DC Blacks. And in two of the most, earth-shattering conflicts in federal prison history is the Aryan Brotherhood and the DC Blacks. And if you go back to the earlier ones that you hear about, on the white side, you're going to hear about T.D. Bigham, Barry Mills, Tommy Silverstein, and sometimes you're not going to hear a Black name mentioned at all unless being a victim, otherwise being Cadillac Smith. But Fly's let's say a person that was involved in all of those conflicts, and when you look up the indictments on both sides, his name is involved. Although his name may be Keith Gaffney Baird, those times it's the same person, and he has been, let's use the word, slightly willing to tell some of his stories, many things that he can't talk about, because as you know, when you talk about DC Blacks and Aryan Brotherhood, war history, many of the Aryan Brotherhood guys, went to trial, got found guilty or pleaded guilty, and everything is in the law book. You could tell their story, but off the top of your head, you can't name one Black guy that was a part of that war that caught a charge that you can name off the top of your head, because many people don't speak about it because those things haven't been, let's use the word, adjudicated.
yeah.
So Fly is in a situation where, as though, excluding the details of some of those things that has no statute of limitation, he has chosen to talk about certain things, like people don't know that at one point in time on a convict level that Black guys out of Washington and the AB were, let's say associates. Let's not,
Cordial.
yeah, cordial. And like I seen on another guy's channel that they kind of challenged the story that Fly had told when he said that the ABs and the homies were in a local jail somewhere in Oklahoma or somewhere. Don't quote me on the lower city, right? But they were going back to court and they had an escape plan together. So people say, "Oh, that could never happen," but they don't realize that these guys not only traded coffee and heroin, they gave each other knives. Remember, this was a convict thing. What I'm talking about now is not some big dark secret that needs to be held in the basement of the Vatican. Anybody that understands convict history, from a person that been a convict all the way to a guy like a journalist like Pete Early, who walked the compound for 30 days, will tell you that this is the norm.
Mr. What's his name now?
Khalif Mujahid.
Okay, and he actually got a RICO while he was in prison, and that's pretty interesting for those that are criminal aficionados. What was kind of the general story behind that?
And look here, I told you I thought it would be a good interview for you to talk to him. So what I'm gonna do is I'm not gonna go too much into the details, but just to answer your question for whoever may be watching us.
Yeah.
He was charged with running a continual criminal enterprise and a RICO while in prison. The U.S. Attorney's Office out of the Eastern District of Virginia accused him of making almost $1 million a year from his jail cell. It's the only RICO case in D.C. Department of Corrections history. It involved people from as low as COs all the way up to administrators. Multiple people got prison sentences on the Department of Corrections side, and people in Fly's family got all like his sister, for an example, who didn't do anything, in my opinion, got 16 years for just being associated with it. And it was also used and spoke about on a congressional floor when we just talked about the Revitalization Act as one of the reasons that Lorton was shut down. And they said that it was so bad that they had one inmate, and that's their word, inmate, one inmate that ran a drug operation from his prison cell. And with a slight Google search, you can see what I'm talking about, but he can definitely go into the details. But my personal opinion is that, you know, they took a guy, like many guys in prison, that found a way to take care of themselves or maybe send a few dollars home. Like me and you spoke about in private when we said how those RICO laws were used to take down, you know, big time mafia guys. And as prosecutors, U.S. prosecutors learned how to weaponize that law, that they can't get any type of guy with it.
Very scary law.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not for me to minimize who he was, because he's a legend in his own right, regardless. That's not what I'm talking about. But he will even tell you when you talk to him or someone watches his interviews, how they use a lot of these, what I'm gonna call these BS laws. You know, these laws are up for the interpretation of the federal agent or the prosecutor presenting a story to the jury. You know what I mean? And I mean, just the whole aspect of this guy. Just think about this. I'm gonna go into this. This guy who was Keith Gaffney, baby, call him Fly. This guy went to trial on a RICO charge in federal court with an ex-offender that had changed his life and became a school teacher in a prison. And the school teacher beat the RICO charge and he didn't. I'm gonna skip all the other parts. Just think about that. This guy is a big time John Gotti prison RICO boss. And his co-defendant is a teacher that works in a school building that they allege bought some fried chicken and a few packs of drugs in. I'm gonna leave it right there just for the let you know. And that's not to me to belittle it. It's me really, I'm not belittling Fly. What I'm doing is I'm belittling the taxpayers' dollars being spent on what's called a RICO, and they housed this man in prison for almost 26 more years after that time. No.
They doubled his time.
No, he doubled his time. He spent 26 years at ADX. So at this point in time, this was like 19. Oh, no. He had been in about 20 years at that time. So he ended up spending 30 more years in prison on taxpayer dollar about some stuff pertaining to a case that I believe that technically I think that they made the case up. You know, was he slanging and banging and doing this thing? Yeah, he was a jailhouse legend. But did he deserve a life sentence?
A little bit of drugs, a little bit of food. I mean, nothing, yeah.
I mean, a couple extra minutes out of cell.
How much can you do in a prison, right? Yeah.
I mean, he didn't have no cars. I mean, at the end of the fiasco, his family wasn't sitting on a bunch of money and property and this and that. Like, you know,
where's all the money at?
Right. I mean, his mother, if I'm not mistaken, God rest her soul, she was still living in public housing. And no disrespect to people that's did, but you know, people who make millions of dollars, one of the first things they do, from the old gangsters to the gangsters of the day, is what? They take care of mama. If they worth a little bit of their weight in gold.
Yeah, yeah. What's the name of your documentary that's on? Is it on Tubi and Amazon and
Nah,
everything?
we just took it. It was on Amazon. It's called Lorton Prison of Terror. But we just took it down for some, let's say, copyright issues, and we're gonna end up doing it on our own. So
Who do you distribute it through?
we did it ourselves. We just uploaded it through our personal company.
Oh well, because you know, I'm part of a company. We're like the biggest indie. We have like 1,300 movies on Tubi, Amazon, everything. So I can put you with them.
Yeah,
Like a
so we
lot of
we talk offline.
all the urban movies like that are on Tubi that all went through me. All this Detroit stuff, I started all that stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah. I went to Detroit and I had a book signing at the Urban Expo with Michelle Moore. They've been doing a couple books to movies. But I got tons of books. Like if we wasn't on here for us to talk, just talk. I can show you. I got books with my name on it. They need to go
so
to
are those
movies.
on Amazon? Can they buy that? Where
Yeah,
can they
yeah,
buy
yeah.
all your stuff?
Eon
Do you have
Will,
a
you go to
main
Eon
website
Williams.
or
Yeah, you go to eonwilliams.com. That's my website. But you can go to you go to amazon.com and you can see books with my name on it. Then books, let's say that I'm a co-writer on them too. But just type in Eon Williams on Amazon, you'll see a couple things.
is that your favorite thing? Would you if you had to describe yourself as one thing, would it be a writer, a filmmaker, a activist, a writer, probably?
I'm a hustler, man. I
Well,
do
we're
whatever
all hustlers, but
I
in
do
terms
whatever
of
it
your
takes from dominoes to homicide. But I'm definitely an author and an activist, man.
not like you're writer. Yeah, that's good. Well, it all springs from thinking in the written word and speaking.
Oh
You
yeah,
can't
it's
do any of the other
intellectual
stuff
property.
without that.
Yeah, I could re-up without money.
What do you say? You can re up without money?
Yeah, I can re-up without money.
Oh, you can just create something out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when are you guys gonna get that Lorton doc? When will it be able to
I
go
mean, it's
back up?
crazy that man, you talk about it today. I just had a conversation with my partner. We're supposed to have a meeting this weekend. So hopefully, man, I'm gonna try to just repackage the whole thing because we had some I don't want to, like, everybody use the word haters. I don't look at everything as haters, but we had some people that wanted to challenge the creative ownership of some of the things. And I could
Oh
go
yeah,
into
yeah,
that. Like, I find it funny that I could have a picture of me and some people that spent time in prison with me, and somebody else could say they own that picture. It's my picture. You get it?
so what made you acquiesce to their demands? You just didn't feel like dealing with it? They didn't take you to court, did
Well,
they?
nah, I'm gonna tell you, I can answer that question as well. If it was up to me, like I would have said, for lack of a better term, I'd have been like, F it. But you know, it's me and two other people. I mean, and you know, their assets may be more than my
Oh,
assets.
okay. So these people were threatening legal
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, people are crazy, but I learned to
But I got a trick for that too. I mean, because and I thank you too for this. I had a slight copyright issue, and I had to look up fair use and all
fair
these.
use. That's right.
So in the process of me playing with YouTube, I doubled back and researched the law for that, and I'm about to. That's how we can actually. To be honest with you, that's how we repackage in the film. We just gonna change some of the pictures, and the other ones that's on there, we gonna let it ride with fair use.
Well, there's a lot of money to be made. You know, the Amazon Tubi thing can pay more than YouTube. Like, you know, each project is different, but like I've had movies make plenty of money on those platforms as well. So, you
Yeah,
know, you know, like whatever things that you could turn into full docs, you should, you know,
yeah.
because there's money. There's definitely money
Yeah,
in
I mean,
that.
I was checking out your American Dope. You got some American Dope that's not on YouTube, right?
No, I got 9 or 10 full docs on Amazon. Yeah, I mean
Right, right.
yeah. So, uh, and they're probably on YouTube in trimmed down formats, but you know, but you got to make the money three ways. So,
Yeah, I agree.
um, okay, so yeah, I'd love to talk to Fly and get an interview,
Yeah, I'm
and
gonna reach out to Fly for you, man.
and now that I know you know so much, well, let's do another maybe do another. Maybe we can do these every so often.
Yeah, come on, man. Let's do that, man. I'm trying to do the YouTube thing. So, man, I appreciate it.
Okay, bet. Well, thank you, and we're gonna. Where can they get what you had, or where can they get your products?
Amazon is cool. Just type Eyone Williams in Amazon. Man, make sure that anybody
Eyone.
Eyone Williams, and I'm DC Blacks, DC_Blacks on YouTube. I mean on Instagram, and EyonWilliams.com is my website, man. And from there, just follow me on this journey and me telling the story of guys like myself that come from Washington D.C.
Well, thank you for the DC history, especially about the 1860s. I didn't know that stuff.
Oh,
And
yeah. I pride myself on knowing some of that.
okay, all right, man. American Dope. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Catch you next time.
Yes, sir.